Oh yes, on another valuation, they found that minor differences in ship class didn't affect the outcome of actions. So if, for example, you had 5 destroyers attacking the Bismarck in the middle of the night, well, which class destroyer it was didn't actually matter to the outcome of the battle. And this is not surprising, because on average in real life, what happens is, on average, what should happen. So history tends to be an average result, not always, but on average. So that was an interesting result. They realised that the importance of pre-battle orders. You clearly got a very clear strategy lines, right, what you're going to do, who's going to do what, otherwise you'll end up shooting each other. Physical separation of captains on the playing area, introduced command and control things, ship recognition, coordinating your fire control, because you want every ship on the enemy side to be engaged by someone, because we know that interferes with their estimating range to hit you. Whereas if no one's shooting at you, you slow down, don't you, take your time. So everyone's got to be engaged, but you also need to concentrate your fire to try and overwhelm particular ships. The risk of friendly fire torpedoes, lack of formation, this thing. Morale. I have seen Fletcher Pratt Naval Wargames, for example, for Pratt, where a particular destroyer captain fled in the face of the enemy. That they saw other destroyers around them were being slotted, and they then withdrew behind the hood, actually, the battle cruiser hood.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong there? Yes. So there is morale in these games. Now, my own view is that those aspects of naval warfare are simply not modelled in other naval war games. You just don't see it. Okay, next one, please. Oh, yes. Yes, yes, a particularly fine, upstanding gentleman just there. Yes. The ranges used by Donald Featherstone, it's quite interesting, they weren't actually Donald Featherstone's. He said he got them from some American geezer. So I'm pretty certain the ones Donald Featherstone uses, the shorter ranges, are actually Fletcher Pratt's ranges for his flat. And the armor penetration table is for the shorter ranges, the one reproduced in the book. Donald Featherstone said, no, I got it from this American guy who played in these games. So I think we even have those flat ranges as well. Right, okay, next one please. Now, final slides. Fred Jane Pratt. Whatever we think of them now, we've got to respect the fact that in World War I, the Fred Jane game was respected and played by military figures at the time, professionals at the time, and they treated it as real. Well, it's quite clear that the Fletcher Pratt game in World War II in America was also treated as a valid model of warfare, slightly different from the Naval College one, but maybe it was more fun, maybe fun is good in the evenings or whatever. It was used by the Naval War College, but when they played the games, it from the anecdotal evidence I've had from Commander Bottle and others, that he didn't hesitate to stop the game if it wasn't going right and push everything back, because it wasn't a game, it was training. And I can see that it could be an interesting training tool for young officers. But it was definitely treated as a realistic model of warfare, whatever we say now. And looking back, we must reflect the fact that the big gun captains at the time thought that was a simulation. Whatever we think about, whether we criticise it, well, our views are from a long way away. Next one, please. Well, Commander Bothwell said, upon reflection of 30 years naval command experience, I could not fault the rules as a straightforward simulation of big gun naval warfare. Thank you very much. Any questions?
You mentioned in passing that you won in the 1921 Wargame.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that? Because that sounds fascinating.
Right, that is in the back. Sorry, it's not out of my book. That is in the back of the Fred Jane book I've produced. If you don't want to buy the Fred Jane book, you ask me around, so I'll just give you a copy of the rules. They are Kriegspiel type rules. They are deterministic, so at certain range you get a certain number of hits. And the way they use them is you'd have a discussion about tactics on the chalkboard. You would then go to the floor, lay out your ship models, you'd give orders, then the umpires would criticise the way the orders were given. Then you'd start moving around your ship models. The umpires would stop the game and criticise you if you're doing something they didn't approve of, so it kept being moved back. and then you'd measure the ranges and work out how many hits you get, and all the time the umpires would be stopping the game, and at some point they would conclude the game and say, okay, we're stopping the game now, you've learnt everything you're going to learn from this exercise, and then they would emphasise that this was only a simulation, and the real thing, chance could lead to a very different, completely different outcome. So don't think just because it says you're only going to stand 25% chance of being hit, you might be hit a lot more. Don't be surprised by the unexpected. So they emphasise the random aspects of real warfare, and just saying this was the average result which you're seeing.
Do we know where that was used? Was that HMS Dryad or?
All I know, it was used by the Royal Navy. I haven't gone any further. I haven't been into the archives to see where it was used. I haven't investigated where I've
I'm
investigated.
just thinking, I know that they did do exercises on the tactical table at Dryad, which I'm trying to think what branch that would have been. I'm imagining gunners. But there's a bit in John Winton's Sink the Haguro,
Yes.
where the guy who's just pulled off, albeit slightly after the end of the war, so but never mind that, has, for the first time in the history of destroyers, destroyed an enemy major unit without any supporting major units of his own. No destroyer captain had ever previously done that. First done in 1945.
Yes.
But you'd think that's pretty successful, and a man deserves a pat on the back, but they critiqued his actual battle on a tactical table at Dryad and wrote up a report telling him what he'd done wrong, and next time he should improve in these ways. Thank you.
Yes. Well, that was the very British, wasn't it, American Operation Analysis. They were gaming, weren't they? Or gaming, yeah, they were gaming everything, weren't they, after it happened, running through again.
But it's the trading, there's a big difference between what you want from a training game and what you want from an operational analysis treatment.
Yes, there is.
And in many cases, what you want is the diametric opposite.
Yes.
So you've got to decide which is going to be the focus, because you can't have both. And I think a lot of evils occur when people use games or simulations that are meant for one,
Yes.
and uncritically use them for the other.
Yes.
Could I ask, you make a strong connection between this recreational game and the US Navy looking on this as a valid model. Is there any evidence, I guess before about 41, of other navies looking at Fletcher, Pratt with any kind of interest? Is there any sense that the British or the Germans, the French, Italians, even the Japanese are sort of sending along naval attaches to sit at the back and smoke cigarettes while the dizzy dames are out front?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I know that the Royal Navy visiting captains played the game. There was one torpedo. It was someone in destroyers who came along and then showed Fletcher Pratt how to use torpedoes properly, and said, you know, the attack, about how you come in from different directions, and talked about the maths about how you arrange it and how you coordinate it. He did lose half his destroyers in the attack though, but apparently he sank half the enemy fleet, so it was quite impressive. But that's anecdotal. Was there any evidence? No. So apart from British Royal Navy captains, obviously it was captains who played the game, you understand, socially, yes. Yeah, he was part of the social scene. But apart from that, no, I haven't seen any.
It's a very hard thing to know how one would trace it down, but given the nature, particularly the Germans, hoovering up all sorts of information, even vaguely related,
Yes.
you just wonder whether there wouldn't have been a pre-to-read naval attaché sitting at the back of one of these things.
And we do know the Imperial Japanese Navy had its own wargaming activity to pre-rehearse battles. But I don't know if you sort of imagine at that time the Japanese were not going to make up anything out of whole cloth themselves. They were going to follow the model of the big navies. You know, they modelled the Imperial Japanese Navy on the Royal Navy to a great extent until quite late.
Yes.
And presumably they recognised that the US was going to be the world leaders.
Because we know they played games, they modelled they gamed every operation, didn't they?
Admiral Ugaki is the least successful umpire in wargaming history.
Well, yes, the Free Kriegspiel overruling decision. Because, by the way, in these games, or when they were used as training games, the umpires overruled things and moved things back continuously. So it was just considered acceptable practice to stop the game on exercise. Say, no, let's do this. So we can't criticise the Japanese umpires for doing it. Well, except they were wrong.
At least have the decency to commit it.
Now, I only have half of the Wargames Whale, which the journal produced by the Fletcher Pratt Naval Wargame, by Fletcher Pratt and Inga, when Fletcher Pratt was away. The other half are in America. Now I know the person who has them, but they've moved station a number of times, so they just have to relocate them again. So when I see the other half of that correspondence, there might be something in there anecdotally. But I'm quite keen, because there's the Fletcher Pratt Napoleonic Naval Wargame, and I've got half of it. The other half is in the other issue, which you believe is really irritating. But I haven't got that other half of the issue. But I might do if I'm lucky.